Yes, welcome back. This is F a Rap Critic, and I am still Malik 16. And no, I didn't just break the bandana out because it's Tupac's 50th birthday. I broke the bandana out because it goes with the ensemble. And yeah. I mean, that's part of it. You got to keep it, with the theme. We're keeping it very Oakland. We're keeping it very black on black. We're keeping it very Digital Underground family. And a shout out, a huge RIP to the musical genius himself, Gregory Jacobs, Shock G. And with no further ado, you know what to do. Like and subscribe if you have not already. And we're gonna jump right into it. Category 2, the rap performance on the album. Now, if we're talking about rap performance, we go into dimension 1, which is personality and charisma. How much personality and charisma were expressed on this album? Well, Shock G alone had no less than 7 aliases, everything from MC Blowfish to, as we described in video 1, Piano Man, Rackadelic. Everybody knows Humpty Hump. Some of you did not know that Shock G and Humpty Hump were the same person. That speaks to this man's genius. But almost a one-man band, Shock is never too selfish to share the spotlight. Kind of not unlike, but very much unlike your Will.i.ams and your Wyclefs, who are like, yeah, this is my family, but I'm gonna take the lead on every song and most of the verses. Shock somewhere in the middle there. He's gonna show up on every song. He's gonna ad-lib. He's gonna have the direction and the arrangement because he's the producer and he's the leader. But he's, letting people rock and fly. On Tales of the Funky, Big Money Otis really is the lead on that song, but Shock G is accenting it. But Shock G has plenty of solos, like Flowing on the D-Line and Good Thing We're Rapping. And with as many characters, sometimes you get lost in who is this coming from? So on a song like No Nose Job, that is deliberately the Humpty Hump song. I explained in video 1, my theory is that this is him keeping a Humpty character alive, but also trying to do that by sending a strong message that this Humpty character is not permission for him to sell out or forget that they are a rap group and he's a rap act, no matter what the commercial success generated from Humpty was. That whole Nose Job song was a metaphor for that. We'll talk more about that down the line. But then you get songs like Good Thing We're Rapping, where he's in this character of Icy Mike, in and out. And I'll talk about in and out why when we go down a little further. The other rappers bring a lot of personality as well. Money B, and then you get Tupac, of course, and Pee Wee, and the kid Baby D, who you'll remember from the No Nose Job video, very prominently featured. So yeah, Baby D is in there. So there's lots of personality all throughout, because there's lots of personalities. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 2. Now this is where it gets interesting, the question of believability or suspension of disbelief, right? If you're supposed to believe that Shock G's many characters are characters, then where does the line of fiction and reality come into play? And this is no more evident than on the final song, Good Thing We're Rapping, which racks my brain, again, how criminally overlooked Digital Underground and Shock G is and are, because this song, 1991, a song about pimping, which sounds like Life in the Day of Andre Benjamin, is the last song on the Love Below album. And it's almost the same. This song is unorthodox. It doesn't follow any bar count scheme. He just kind of goes how he wants to go over it. The beat is not standard. It's this dark ripping beat. And he's telling his tale with so many nuanced details and specific elements that it has to come from lived experience, even though it's credited as being in this character of Icy Mike, who was a pimp character Shock G created. He's telling you his tale. And if you look in the few places that have biographical information about Shock G, it tells you there's a period where he drops out of school, moves away from home, and is doing petty crime. He winds out west, and this song is telling this tale of him going from Las Vegas down to San Diego, from LA, pimping, learning the pimp trade, him having these people that he rolls with. And at the end, he shouts out so many real pimp figures across the country. And so does Big Money Otis at the end. And it's like, how fictional was this? You know, it's so specific. And he even says lines like, you know, and I'll tell you, when I think of how we used to live back then, you know, he's like, man, it's a good thing we're rapping. Part of what makes it so crazy is this idea that in rap, everything is stressing authenticity. And you know, if this narrative is autobiographical on Shock G's account, he's given a whole slice of his real life that he only mentions once and never brags about it. And this is what I mean about this album being criminally underrated, because this would be fodder for, you know, social media right now. Like, oh, Shock G used to be a pimp at some point in his life, but it's so lost in history. While everybody, you know, goes gaga over Too Short, who never has been an actual pimp, or Ice-T, and these people who had one foot in the pimping space, you know, Snoop, people who claim pimping. And then you have Shock G, who's like, yeah, there was a time in my life where I was pimping before rapping. I'm going to talk about it just this once. I'm not going to glorify it after that, even though the song really does glorify it. But yeah, it's just really interesting. And again, if it is a fictional work, the storytelling aspect of it has to be applauded, because it's done so well, like a real good movie should be done. So the question is, how much do you believe moments like that? Flowing on the D line, he's telling this very simple tale about being on a train, flirting with some women, but then he makes these real life references like, you're lucky I'm not Dr. Dre, I would have slapped you, which speaks to this other point where there's some hints of belittling women on points in this album. Digital Underground is not above that. As free as Digital Underground were with that whole Parliament Funkadelic, free your mind and your booty will follow, everybody's consensual adults, was this element of women being a little more than sexual objects throughout this album for whatever purposes Shock G were trying to get across on his solo songs. Or maybe because those are supposed to be the harder edge, I'm gonna prove, you know, I can hang with any rappers, I'm realer than most of your rappers. But yeah, then you get songs like Heartbeat Prots, where it sounds like really from the gut, especially when he's shouting out all of these like conscious black figures or prominent pro-black figures in the industry at that time. And, you know, he's saying it with lots of emphatic kind of like force, you know. Even points in the songs where he gets louder, points like Malcolm X, and he wants to be like, F that, and, you know, like people chumping out, and even Big Money Otis, he's like, I want to send the F you out to the dude who assassinated Huey P. Newton. Like, there's not a lot of suspension of disbelief on this particular album, because MC Blowfish is not really present here, and some of the more outlandish characters, everything is really close to the ground on this album. So really something to consider when you think about how much you believe the rappers on this album, compared to if you're being asked to suspend disbelief. I think most of this is face value. What I'm saying is what I feel on this album. So something to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 3, which is delivery and use of voice. Shock G himself, right? I'll get to him in a minute, but I mentioned in video 1, being a little curious as to why Digital Underground made the conscious decision to continue to add rappers to their roster, to their group. This is an ensemble group, but again, from a money standpoint, adding more rappers, when you have your 2 main rappers, especially the ones that people know the most, Money B and Shock G, it's like, why? And so I particularly have a question mark when it comes to someone like Pee Wee, who again was brought on in the group as both a rapper and producer, and I think his production contributions are integral and crucial to continuing the Digital Underground legacy. But as a rapper, if I was Money B, I would be like, why do we need him? They sound very similar in tone and projection. The only difference here being that Pee Wee has a little bit more of a twang and raps a bit faster. I think he may be slightly more, you know, lyrically inclined and use more syllables than Money B. And down the line, he carved his own niche in hip hop history. But for this to be the first album where you hear him, from this very first song, he's the first verse, it's like, I thought that was Money B for a minute until I learned that it wasn't. Big Money Otis is an analog. It's almost like they got the second string of Shock G and Money B in contrast to voices, where Shock G has always had the mellow, deeper voice, and Money B has had the higher voice. This is where you get that Big Money Otis and Pee Wee team up, because they were their own group too down the line, and that contrast exists. Now, Big Money Otis' voice is deeper than Shock's, and so it's a nice addition. It's just a question mark addition. Tupac, of course, comes in, and Tupac sounds like a blending of all the members of Digital Underground at that point in his rap career, while he still has that, as Shock G described it, that Martin Luther King pull from the chest. He does this thing that all of the Digital members do as far as flow. We'll talk about that in the next dimension. They all blend well. None of them clash with each other. And then you get the background singing. Everybody contributes to the chanting and the harmonizing. Shock G, of course, leads all the vocals. They all line up nicely, because on songs where you accept that this is not supposed to be this, ooh, they can sing, they're just carrying this tune, it works. And on songs where it's just smoothly slipped in there, it's a nice accent. And so let's not neglect the singing. The singing is a part of Shock G's arrangement genius. The melodies that are chosen on this album, especially on songs like Sons of the P, the melodies for the hooks, the hook making ability, this is all dealing with seeing how the voice could be used, making a decision on using the voice, and getting everybody down and incorporating that into the sound. And then the background singing, so all of that is important, even when it's a female voice involved. So then we get to Shock. Now, Shock is a master at using the voice. If you remember nothing else from Shock G's legacy, if you're not gonna remember the musical arrangement, the foresight and vision to splice and sample elements of funk and different old school songs, or the futuristic vision, then at least remember that this is a man that will change his voice at a whim to make a point. Lots of Slick Rick style back and forth. One vocal intonation is going to ask the question, another vocal intonation is going to answer it, almost like they're two separate characters. You're getting that all throughout songs. But I think one thing that makes this album super unique is Shock G's leading and direction on having different members of the group ad-lib and stack on each other's verses for that contrast of voices. So where Big Money Otis raps on D-Flow Shuttle, Pee Wee overlaps and you get that contrast. And then there's songs where Shock is rapping and Money B raps and ad-libs on top of his. And then you'll also hear Baby D's vocals on top of Shock G's vocals on Heartbeat Props, just like on No Nose Job. They're coming in right on time, and it's really drilling home the fact this is a group. We stand together, we work together, we know each other's verses, we know each other's lines. Maybe we even wrote lines for each other. Brilliant. No one in rap was doing that. We were all getting that call and response thing where everybody shouts in unison. That's on this album too, but that we're gonna ad-lib each other's verses and stack each other's lines and come in at key points, take out, jump in, that's brilliant. Now, Shock G also uses his Humpty Hump voice. There's an Icy Mike voice. He does this thing every now and then where he wants to let you know he's a serious rapper. He'll put on his straightforward, I'm gonna put more effort and projection in my voice. So songs like Flowing on the D-Line and Good Thing We Rapping, man, he's projecting like a mug. As opposed to other songs where he wants to be super smooth, what we're used to hearing Shock G do. D-Flow Shuttle, smooth Shock G voice. Kiss You Back, smooth Shock G voice. So really genius uses of the voice. This is a master class in how to use the voice. I know I've said that for other album reviews, but I mean it more than ever on this album. The voice is the final instrument on this album, and Shock G was fully aware of that on a preferential level and as someone who studied music theory. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, and that takes us to dimension 4. Oh, the flow. This is early 90s, so it's not rare to hear the pickup flow, and the pickup is going to be more in the flipping the syllables like that out of nowhere. You're doing a straightforward rap style, you know, you're doing your A-B rhyme scheme, and then out of nowhere you go, dropping the bows and coming back to it. A lot of rappers were doing that, but not as many rap groups and acts were doing it as smoothly as Digital Underground does. From the very first verse on this album, Pee Wee comes around and around and around and around it goes. Like, you're gonna hear that all throughout. Tupac does it, Shock G does it on certain songs, Money B really ran with it, and Pee Wee really ran with it the most. And it's so smooth. And when you get to songs like Family of the Underground, different members do that. Now, Family of the Underground is a showcasing of a range of different rappers and different flows and skills, so you're hearing different patterns there. You get someone like Mac Moan who comes out with this style, which as a kid, man, I used to think this style was just everything. Hearing rappers spell out their name in that broken down staccato style, he spells his name, the M, the O, the N, the E, I thought that was everything. It's so basic to me now, but hearing it like that, it's very distinct from how the first rapper, Blanco, comes on, and Stretch, who raps real straightforward. Just a lot of curse words and the aggressive tone, not a lot of flow styling there. But you're getting such a variety. By the end, the last couple rappers on that song are really doing the pickup flow and going back and forth, doing this I pass it to you relay kind of style. And all throughout, when Shock does that mellow voice, he does more of a talking sound, but every now and then he slips into this melodious cadence where he's kind of doing a sing-songy flow. Good thing with rapping is more narrative. So he's just talking, but when he says certain lines with the pimp element to it, he makes them stand out, he drops the beat, and he makes them go right in pocket. So I think it's interesting the flows on here because they become distinctly Digital Underground, even though they fit right with what was going on at the time, just like the production. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when we're thinking about the flow. Now, Dimension 5, wordplay and bar intent. Wordplay and bar intent, you're not getting tons of wordplay. You're getting these verses packed with imagery. There's so much imagery on this album and so much descriptive language used and poetic language at times, because they're putting messaging in these fun sounding songs. But there's choices that are made to paint visual pictures. On Flown on a D-Line, Shock G says, 2 russet potato and bacon eating sisters, to emphasize this idea that they're thick, or maybe they're just like these scallywags on the train that he's just thinking about sex with. But the choice to say the kind of food that makes their shape. And then again, on Good Thing We're Rapping, the choice to use these comedic pimp references. He said, I looked to my boy and he said, Mac, 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 Mac. Or we both got in the car and we yelled out, it's pimping. These references from Iceberg Slim literature and the Mac movie and just pimp culture in general. Remember, this is the Bay Area. Genius. These are deliberate choices to use. So you start to understand that there was intent within all the verses on this album, from the poetic lines to the comedic lines. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. We jump then to Dimension 6, which is about the punchlines and poetic wisdom, the overall quotability of this album. I think now you're gonna hear more people quote from it now that Shock G has passed on, and people always love to go back posthumously and, you know, really see the value of what was made by artists. And without a doubt, Digital Underground is a group full of artists, Shock G being a genius artist, and you're gonna get these memorable lines because you got a song like Heartbeat Props where he's saying, man, he's saying things like, yeah, he goes on a limb, he calls Ice Cube a prophet, but there's lines on that song where he makes a point about people, you know, claiming to be pro-black, claiming to be about militant and conscious purposes, but always wanting to duck out or, you know, kind of dwindle away when it comes to standing up and taking action. And we live in an era of armchair activism where people just tweet or post about something and they feel like they've done their good deed for the day and that's it. And they're like, yeah, I'm woke and I'm socially conscious. This song was directly speaking to that 31 years before its time. Then you get poetic sensibility on songs like D-Flow Shuttle, where they're talking about wanting to be taken away to another place where some of the stresses and strife of daily life, not inherently black life, but you get that from verses like Tupac's verse, of course, is going to speak more to the black struggle. Now, what Pee Wee does, he does biblical allegory and biblical allusions, where he's like, this is like scripture, this is like Moses, swing low, sweet chariot. He's saying all of these things that refer back to the Bible, and this idea of waiting for something better, waiting for, you know, the second coming, or if they're carrying the spirit of Parliament Funkadelic, waiting for that mothership connection, right? There was always this theme and ideology of the mothership coming to take us to a higher place, a better place. Even in some of the 5% ideology, there's that belief that there is more. So the D-Train shuttle was taking them to this other place away from the stress and strife. And the language that they used on that song, on each verse, was really poetic. You're gonna get that same poetic language on Sons of the P. And then, you know, you get these comedic bars. These comedic bars are gonna be present on stuff like No Nose Job and Good Thing We're Rapping. But on No Nose Job and Good Thing We're Rapping, this is comedy, but it's real tongue-in-cheek. So, food for thought. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, which takes us to the 7th dimension, which is concepts. This album is chock full of concepts. No Nose Job being one of the most clever concepts in hip hop ever. The whole song is one long metaphor. You know when it's a long metaphor throughout, it's called a conceit. And it's the idea that having a nose job is augmenting what you are naturally. It's trying to be something you're not. And that all goes to this idea of not selling out, not completely crossing over, even though we might make music that would be considered crossover. We're not gonna sell out. In Humpty Hump's case, as the performer on this particular song, Shock G's character, he's saying selling out also means denying his blackness, the nose being representative of blackness. As we know, the nose is one of the famous features that always reference when we talk about what is a phenotypical African-American or black trait. And so that whole song is symbolic. It's like, I'm not losing my blackness. He even has this line where he says, sometimes I feel like I'm not black enough. I'm high yellow. And if I made any change, my nose is brown, referring to the Groucho Marx Humpty Hump nose being darker than the rest of his face. He's like, it'd be in that direction. I'd go blacker. Metaphorically speaking, anything I do is for my people. And if I change at all, it's gonna be in the vein of lifting my people up. I'm not gonna go the other way. Really interesting stuff, man. So that's a huge concept. Tales of the Funk, conceptual just because they're just giving homage and talking about the history of funk music and Parliament Funkadelic. Sons of the P, conceptual loosely, but yeah. D-Flow Shuttle, conceptual loosely because we're waiting for this train to take us home to this better place. And we'll talk more about all these songs in the next dimension where we talk about content, because where there's concepts, there's content. Something for you to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 8 and dimension 9, where we talk about the content externalized and the content internalized. How much of that is on this album, how much is being talked about outside of Digital Underground and within Digital Underground. Again, outside, almost every song is full of content. And even when it's not content, it's still somewhere that's semi-topical, right? So you really don't need that much content on an album of 9 songs, but you get all the content you need with the first 3. D-Flow Shuttle, about wanting to go away from the stress and strife, racism, rent, just wanting to go to a better place. Each rapper stays on topic and brings their own flair to it, but they're talking about something. Heartbeat Props, about recognizing the great things that people who are right next to you and live and do. That whole song is about why are you not recognizing who we have here? There's a refrain that they repeat. You're giving more props to a dead man than you give my man, and my man's got the plan in his hand. This is give people their flowers, give your heroes their flowers while they're still able to smell them. Before we even caught on to that catchphrase and started using that and hashtagging that everywhere. Then we go right to No Nose Job about not selling out, not thinking that something is better. You know, you can take it on the surface level, plastic surgery, why do you want to change yourself? Or you can take it on a deeper level, why do you want to change at all? Stay true to your roots. Then Sons of the P, wanting this higher purpose, wanting to look beyond perception, wanting people to open their mind and expand. That's 4 songs already. That's how the album begins. By the time you're able to take this little mental break with a song like Flowing on the D-Line, it's welcome, because you had so much food for thought to chew on at that point that it's like, yeah, okay. You could tell a little tale about being on a train, drinking a brew, flirting with some women, and just wanting to rap for the sake of rapping. Because right after that, you come with Tales of the Funk, where you're given this audio biography of Parliament Funkadelic, who the whole album is dedicated to anyway, giving props and love, doing what you speak, right? Giving your heartbeat props to George Clinton while he's around. And then from there, you go to Family of the Underground, which is another invited break where you just get to rap for the sake of rapping, and come right back with Good Thing We're Rapping, which, again, I'm waiting for somebody to confirm that this is a true story from Shock G's life of what he was doing before he was rapping, because that's all that they keep coming back to is, man, it's a good thing we're rapping because this is what I used to do. You know, he said it was the year 81. And he takes you on his journey, which is going to take us to our final dimension. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, the content on this album. All right, final dimension, storytelling, dimension 10. Good thing that we're rapping. You don't need any other stories on here because you have that one long story. Man, what a story. Whether it's fictional, if you believe it's fictional, it's so good at seeming real because the attention to detail is on the highest level. You know, he details everything from the plates on the car, the style of the car, the year it was, the names of people. Again, if he's making that up, then to have that much, you know, I don't care where the influence is. I don't care if he read Iceberg Slim or Tales of a Pimp right before he wrote it and put the book down and wrote his verse, just to be able to come up with these characters, Fresh West, Ebony, you know, it's just amazing. He gives you a slang tutorial in the middle of that song where he's using slang that, again, I didn't know, you know, I mention this all the time, that was being used in 1991. You know, all the slang that we're still using right now. He talks about a fight scenario and what he was wearing, and just little lines like, it's dope how you wear your ballies, it's dope how you wear your pants tucked in your ballies. Like, what? Details. The bartender laughed at us at the end. Man, great storytelling. Now, if it's not fictional, if it's autobiographical, then what a great photographic, cinematic memory to take us right into this segment of your life and feel like we were right there in the car for that ride. So yeah, that's all the storytelling you need on the album, is a song like Good Thing We're Rapping, a great study in hip hop narration and taking you on a journey through somebody's life. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That concludes our part 2, category 2 review of this classic album, Sons of the P by Digital Underground. Again, RIP and happy birthday to Tupac, 50 years old, man. We have been without this man in the hip hop game for over 2 decades now, and that is just really crazy to believe. I mean, just also want to use this time to acknowledge Shock G, Gregory Jacobs, send a RIP. And if you have not, like and subscribe to the channel. We need that. We are still building this global hip hop community. Y'all know what it is. Until then, F a rap critic. You talk about it while I live it. Word to Matt.